Darling, sweetheart, my dear. Now, is it okay for men to use terms like that when they're talking to women, especially in a professional environment? You ready for some good conversation and strong opinions? Well, it's time for tea. I'm Dionne Jackson Miller. Stay tuned. So I did an interview that got a little bit heated, as some of my interviews do, which is fine. I'm always up for a good debate. And at the end now, I'm about to sign off. I'm thanking the interviewee and I wish him a good weekend. And his response is, same to you, my dear. And I said, no, Dionne. No, to give him his credit, he then called me, he then said Dionne. I'm not trying to load him up by name, all right, because that's not what's important. It's the issue that's important that I want to talk about, because I then posted on X and on IG this. I said, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Whenever men start to call me my dear or darling or sweetheart, is when they don't like how an interview is going. It's condescending, it's belittling, it's rude. It's a power play to try to put women in their place. So somebody probably going to come out and say, but I heard you this time talking to this one or this one and he did it and you didn't call him out. So what? Sometimes I get tired, all right? Sometimes I just get tired of all the nonsense and I can't bother. I will tell you this. On almost every occasion where I've let it slide, I regretted it. A nice woman called me one day and told me I was rude to a cabinet minister because I told him not to do it. And she didn't like how I sounded. She didn't think it sounded respectful. She never had nothing to say about how the cabinet minister spoke to me. But all right. And it's something I've posted about before. It always gets a whole heap of comment. It starts a discussion. Some people agree, some people don't agree. Some people start pointing to other situations where people are called dear and darling to try to say that what I'm saying no go so. Yeah, whole heap of comments. So let's work through some of the issues people are raising then, all right? Now, first of all, a lot of women have had this experience. This is not a Dionne thing. Look at some of the responses to my post. Emma said, yes, absolutely hate this. It really gets me. Simonda says, I believe that whenever the sweetheart or listen dear or honey comes out in a professional setting, watch out. And Sandy says, another one is, calm down when you're not agreeing with them and you're trying to explain your point of view and you were in fact calm. Some people disagreed, so Rossi said, not necessarily. It's a means to create a comfortability in a formal setting. You can simply tell the individual you're uncomfortable with it and please address you by name. There's no malice intended. Tropic Sports Management said, I disagree, trying to figure out how you arrive at that. CW says, I somewhat disagree. Terms like my dear or sweetheart aren't always condescending. It depends on context and intent. Assuming malice without understanding can be unfair. If it feels off, address it directly instead of generalizing. So here's the thing. A lot of us talking about this are professional women who have had to deal with this for years. Of course, there are different motivations for why people do things, all right? And of course, context matters. And that is why I always give a very specific context when I'm talking about this. Interviews, when I am interviewing men and the interview gets tense or heated. And for some reason, people always choose to disregard that context because they just want to make whatever point it is they want to make. Look, the first time I called somebody on this was years and years ago. I was a young reporter. The program Beyond the Headlines was also pretty young. I was interviewing an older male politician, very well known nationally, called Donald Buchanan, Danny Buck for short. And he was obviously annoyed at the way the interview was going. And he kept now saying things like, look here, sweetheart, look here, darling. He did it about twice and I let it slide. And then he came out with, let me tell you something, sweetheart. And at that point, I just had enough. And I said, my name is Dionne Jackson Miller. So it was a whole conversation point, and the legendary Mutty Perkins, he heard it, he played the exchange on his program the very next morning at the beginning of the program with his signature laugh, ho, 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 Mutty used to laugh. Those of you who know Mutty, he actually reached out to me and wanted to meet me just as a result of that interview. Now, Danny Buck, I have to say, he did back down immediately. I think he had apologized. Later on, a friend told me in speaking about it, he admitted he really shouldn't have done that. Anyway, it's something that has happened to me over and over again. It happens when an interview gets heated. It only happens when I'm interviewing a man. And the context is that they are trying to diminish me. They're trying to show me I don't know what they're talking about. They are trying to shut me up. Look, this is not something that's peculiar to me. Go through the responses on my posts, right? Look at the things that other women are saying. Look at other issues they're raising. Ask women about being in a room and being ignored by men who are talking to the men in the room. So Vic says, yup, just had a meeting this morning as a buyer of the property with my agent and the listing agent. He totally disregarded me. Ask women who have had the experience of making a suggestion and seeing it disregarded and then hearing a man in the room in the same meeting make the very same suggestion and everybody acting as if it's something wonderful. You think not no go so? Now, first of all, let me say this to the women who disagree or who want to say they disagree with what I say. Terry, for instance, says, I don't believe it's an in your place thing. It's just an approach to reduce your stance to convince you to agree with their point. With respect to Terry and the other women who are saying that, what I'm saying isn't so, and that's how it goes, that's not what it means. Look, let me say this with respect. I am not here trying to tell you what your experience has been. I am not here trying to tell you what happens in the rooms you have been in. But I am asking you not to negate my lived experience and the lived experiences of many, many women who have dealt with this over the years. Not because it hasn't happened to you or because you don't think it has happened. Just listen to what we're saying. Trust me, this is an issue. And to the people who are saying, oh, Dionne, every man doesn't do this. I can never understand why people feel the need to say this, right? Obviously, any situation you talk about is not going to be something that's done by every single person on earth, or in this case, every single man on earth. And if you're a man and you don't act like this, you don't do this, then hooray, I'm happy for you, and I'm happy for the women who deal with this. But again, I'm talking about a very specific situation and a very specific type of man. If you don't fall into that category, then good. So for instance, Wesley said, I get your point, Dionne, but does that apply to everyone? Someone might be a genuine admirer and just wanting to be nice to you. I don't think you should judge everyone with a broad brush in this matter. So, thank you so much for sharing your views, Wesley, but I beg you, read my post again. Does it sound like I'm talking about a situation in which somebody wants to indicate their admiration of me and be nice to me? No. Again, I'm talking about situations where things get tense or heated, and for the people who think that this is a way or these are things to say to be nice to somebody who is not close to you or not a friend, it's really not. Then now to the men who are trying to tell me that what I'm describing in Augusta and what I'm experiencing, I'm not experiencing. There is a term called mansplaining. It means explaining something to a woman in a condescending way that assumes she has no knowledge about the topic. It's especially offensive when I'm talking about a situation that I've experienced as a woman. And you as a man are trying to tell me nothing Augusta. You know, see how ridiculous that is. So DJ1 now said, people say it all the time. I don't think it's gender specific. Sometimes it depends on the circumstances they're in. Now, I rarely answer people on my posts, other than to say, thank you for responding, I really appreciate it, and so on. Or to answer a specific question. I don't try to get into social media quarrels anymore because I don't find that they're very productive. I had to answer this one though, and I said, thanks for mansplaining to me an experience I've dealt with my entire working life. Then now we have the people who say, no, it's not a gender issue because women do this to women and women do this to men. So Smikeson says, while you're describing your experience, I feel to add it's also common for women to do this to men. As a friend of mine likes to say, two things can be true at the same time. The fact that women do this to women and women do this to men does not negate the point that I'm trying to make. In some cases, by the way, women doing it may be an indication of them being overly familiar, and I can tell you, a lot of people do find that offensive as well. I have a male friend who absolutely hates it. And the fact that women do it to men doesn't mean it's not a power issue. It also doesn't mean it's not a gender issue. It might just look different. Then no, somebody always going to come with a Butch Stewart argument, as I call it. So EANE says Butch Stewart used to do that all the time, but I don't get the feeling he was being condescending. Well, I've been around Butch Stewart a couple of times, and I've heard him with this, especially in interviews, and I'm going to tell you, my view is that it was 100% a power issue for both men and women. And by the way, I think people are missing or ignoring the fact that I'm talking in particular about a professional setting. So put gender issues aside for a moment, put this idea of a power play aside for a moment. If you're not good friends with somebody, maybe you shouldn't be using terms like this to them, whether you're a man or a woman, because the issue of imbalance of power and over familiarity can read in all kinds of different and very negative ways in a workplace, right? If you're calling somebody darling or sweetheart and they don't like it, they may not feel comfortable saying stop it for all kinds of reasons. Some people get offended and then they get vindictive and they make the environment just uncomfortable to work in. So I hear people saying speak up, and obviously I do believe in speaking up, but not everybody necessarily feels comfortable doing that for all kinds of different reasons. Alright, so I know people are going to have very strong opinions on this one. I look forward to reading them while I drink my tea. Alright, just keep it civil. That's all I ask. I do ask you to remember to like the video, share it with somebody you think might be interested in. Of course, subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you get all the videos as soon as they come out. Alright, I'm Dionne Jackson Miller. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.